longer for specie and things like that to make it to Philadelphia, to be turned around and sent back. And what it did was it basically made a business for private mints and private families that had minting operations. For example, in the early days, the Bechtler family, they were doing some assaying, and they were producing tokens. So the U.S. Mint decided, or the United States government decided, we're going to horn these people back out of the business. This is our gig, and this is what we want to do. So they created 3 branch mints. They created one in New Orleans. They created one in Charlotte, North Carolina, and one in Dahlonega, Georgia. And we're not really going to talk about the New Orleans Mint because it has a completely different history.
Yes.
The Charlotte and Dahlonega Mints are really kind of interlinked and something that you don't hear about very often, and so something that we kind of thought would be really interesting.
Oh yeah, if you don't collect American gold, you probably know about them, but it's one of those things that you'll probably never own a coin from one of those mints if you don't collect gold.
Well, if you don't collect gold, you can't own a coin from these two mints.
Well, that's right.
All that they did. So in the early 1800s, discoveries of gold were made in the southern U.S., particularly in the states of North Carolina and Georgia. And to think about things in terms of that time in the United States, you have to remember that, money is worth the metal it is made out of.
Mm-hmm.
Silver, at that time especially. Silver, gold, and copper coins circulate, and, the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia was beginning to kind of come into its own as far as a manufacturing operation, and it supplied the young nation with coin of the realm and meeting the needs of commerce and the general public. Now, there's a legend, and I'm not really sure if it's real or if it's not, but I don't know if you've ever heard the story, Matt, about this 12-year-old kid who was in the creek on his family farm, and he found a, quote, glittering stone.
I think I have heard a story.
It was big, but beautiful, and not really understanding what it might be, he took it home where they used it as a doorstop for a while, until a jeweler came in and purchased it from them. The glittering stone was a gold nugget. It weighed 17 pounds.
Wow.
And as with most discoveries of gold, it wasn't an anomaly. It had brothers and sisters waiting to be pulled from the ground, too. Yes. So very soon the primary activity in the area became gold mining. And, so now you have all this gold, and you need to turn it into money so that you get paid. And in 1835, you would have to send it overland to the nearest port, where it would then go by ship to Philadelphia.
And at that time, if it was coming out of the west, they hadn't found it out west yet, so never mind.
Yeah, no. But, even still, this is in Georgia and in North Carolina where they're finding a lot of it.
Yeah.
It's like they're finding some in Virginia, but the amounts in South Carolina and Virginia and were really small. And actually, the recovery from Georgia and North Carolina was relatively small up until these discoveries were made, and they were made in different places at different times. But so then Dave Bowers said in a guidebook of the United States Mint, now available from Whitman for $24.95, that you would send your gold coins off, or you would send your gold off from Georgia in September of 1835. It wouldn't reach the Philadelphia Mint until October 7th.
Wow.
And the shipper may not receive his compensation for 2 months.
Long time.
Well, and think about it. It's like if you're depending on this for your, daily bread, you got problems. That's a little too long to wait. So an act of March 3rd, 1835.
You get real hungry.
Yeah, you get real hungry. So an act of March 3rd, 1835 provided for the establishment of 3 branch mint facilities. New Orleans was one of the United States' biggest entry ports, and as such, a lot of the silver and gold would come into the country from other countries and other sources, and we would assay it and recoin it into U.S. coin that people knew that they could rely on for purity and consistency. Charlotte, North Carolina, and Dahlonega, Georgia, were chosen as the sites for the other branch mints, as they were both located just adjacent to the mining sites, and would make for a faster return and a lower cost overall. Because Bowers was saying that it would cost up to sometimes 20% to get your gold from where it was to Philadelphia back, and into coin.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't surprise me. It's a long way.
Yeah. So, they set up these minting facilities. They were very small and very simple buildings. Um, and they both existed for quite a while. Both facilities operated until 1861.
Yeah.
Okay, the Charlotte Mint was taken by Confederate troops, and the Dahlonega Mint was part of the state of Georgia. And when they seceded from the United States, they took their mint with them.
They're going to take their mint and leave.
That's right. Neither facility was reopened after the war. The New Orleans Mint did actually resume operations as a U.S. Mint facility.
Yes,
but it would end up being,
its heyday was after.
Yeah, but it would be the only survivor of the three.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is your basic history on what happened, and why it happened, and where it happened. And, I think it's really important to think about things in terms of, how different the world was. It wasn't like you could just, take the gold out of the ground. It would take you weeks to get it assayed and recoined.
You have to ship it
yeah,
over ground.
And people are getting robbed when this is happening. And, just all kinds of problems.
Yep,
so, you had the Beckler family who was created a mining, or not, an assay operation, and they were coining Beckler tokens. And, the U.S. Mint said, no, there's plenty of room for us, and let's get rid of them. And kind of came in and flexed their muscle. But they created these coins that are truly rare. And, a lot of people don't realize that the D Mint mark first appeared on these coins.
That's right.
It may be something real common to you today, but it's not. And the C Mint mark, which
was only used on these coins.
Only used on these coins. So, Matt, what would one find if you examine the coins that they make?
Well, that was my part of this segment. Just for everybody that's listening, Mike came to me and said, "Matt, I'm going to do the history. That's my thing. You handle the coins." So I said, let's do it. So I did a little research into both mints and all the coins they struck. And I guess I'll kind of start with Charlotte. And we're going to kind of run through each of the denominations that they minted pretty quick, but you'll get an idea. So Charlotte struck 3 different denominations. They struck dollars, they struck 2.5s, and they struck $5 gold pieces. The dollar series was only struck in Charlotte for 8 years, and it is the smallest series struck at that mint. One of the things about the Charlotte dollars is their crudeness, because these were not world-class mints like the Philadelphia Mint. These were very small buildings, very limited operations. They really just wanted to get the coins made and get them out. So these coins are exceedingly crude in their actual minting. You see very weak strikes, poorly prepared planchets. So that can kind of be a turnoff to collectors, actually.
What's funny is when I look at pictures of these facilities, they are no bigger than your local post office.
Yeah, they're tiny little buildings.
I mean, they are, and they're probably made out of the same granite.
Yeah, right. That wouldn't surprise me.
Now, I also have to comment that one of the ways that I originally became aware of Charlotte Mint coins was there was an ad that I either saw in a coin group or something like that. Somebody posted, said, "Have you ever seen a grown man cry?" And it showed an ad of a man with a pocket watch in his hand, but it showed the key fob, or the chain fob, and the watch fob. And the watch fob was made out of an 1850C $1 gold coin.
Yep. We had one come through the store several years ago that was actually soldered to a stick pin.
I mean, it's like, there's just, only a couple of thousand of these coins.
Yep, that's exactly right. But, and that was popular, the dollar series at the time. A lot of times they would make things out of them because they were small. They were, little bitty things, and people kind of liked them. So kind of like with the later California gold tokens, it was popular to turn them into jewelry or stick pins or watch fobs or, all sorts of different things. But the gold dollars especially, you see that done with.
Now, in a gold dollar coin, there was $1 worth of gold.
Yes.
So, think about that, $1 worth of gold. But it's what, roughly the size of a 3-cent piece?
Between
the Type 1s, because they're the smaller ones.
The Type 1s were 13 millimeters, I believe. and the Type 2s and 3s were 15 millimeters.
Okay, but how big is a dime?
Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, okay.
I didn't do the research on the dimes. I was doing the research on these. Sorry,
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot with that
one. They're definitely smaller than a dime, though. And I believe they're actually, they may be, the Type 1s may be the smallest coin we ever minted. It's a toss-up.
Dimes are 17 millimeters, and then silver 3-cent pieces were,
13 or 14, maybe. I think it's kind of a toss-up between the Type 1 gold dollar and the
14.
14, yeah.
14.
So the Type 1 gold dollar is the smallest coin we ever made at 13 millimeters.
Yeah. It's just they're tiny.
They're tiny, yeah. So you see that a lot with these coins, but kind of wheeling back to the Charlotte coins in particular, they are made very crudely again, which some collectors are turned off by. But if you're a fan of the Charlotte Mint and especially its coins, you find that kind of alluring because it's, these coins were made basically in a barn, in a glorified barn. So they're going to be crude. And these days the coins are pretty darn expensive. Most of them don't have a mintage of more than a few thousand. It's still rather expensive. I mean, in average circulated grade, I think the coins start off in the $1,500 range just for a common one.
And doing typesets from Charlotte is almost impossible. Yeah, you can do it, but I mean, that's a pretty aggressive pursuit. I mean, when you think about the 1838 and the $5 and the $2.50 Eagles that you're going to need for the type. Now, it brings me to a question that I have to ask. Is the strike improves in the bigger coins, does it not?
Yeah, a little bit, not necessarily. Compared to its Philadelphia Mint counterparts, they are definitely not nearly as well made. I think it improves some, but definitely does not compare across the board. So moving on to the Quarter Eagle, they made 20 different years of the Quarter Eagles in Charlotte. There were no Quarter Eagles made at this mint in 1845, 1853, 1857, and 1859. So, unfortunately, again, these coins are all expensive. There are a number of issues that are very, very low mint, and those particular coins just exceedingly difficult to find in any grade, let alone AU or better. I mean, it's almost unrealistic to collect this coin to collect this particular series. I mean, you could do it, but I suspect that putting a set of the 2.5s together would cost you probably $75,000 to $100,000 for 20 coins.
That's pretty steep.
Yeah, they're not cheap. And the Half Eagles was actually the largest mintage at the Charlotte Mint, with a series of 24 coins. They minted them continuously, with the exception of 1845. They did not mint any that year. They are one of the most popular denominations from this particular mint for two reasons. One has to do with their large size. Obviously, bigger coins are always more popular. And also, these coins actually seem to be the ones that they made the most of. And also, the larger coins seem to be made the best. Still not comparative to the Philadelphia counterparts, again, but still they seem to be struck decently. Once again, planchet preparation was not great, so you do see coins that were actually made ugly. It's a term we use sometimes, but that basically refers to a coin that had an issue when it was made or when it was struck, that makes it unattractive or might hurt its collectability, i.e. a pitted planchet or something like that will cause a coin to just get made ugly. So it's definitely mint made, but it is what it is.
Something that I think is a nice perspective, or at least a perspective that I'd like people to have on these, is the fact that if you look at the mintages of particularly the 2.5 and the $5 Eagles, over the course of time, over the period of time between 1838 and 1861, it's like you can see just exactly how much gold was flowing in. And that
Yes.
gives you an idea of how big these loads of gold that they found were.
Yeah.
Because that was where it primarily